Welcome back. In today's episode, we're going to talk about rice. Wow. Oh, I'm Sohla El-Waylly. We have to do that part. Hi, I'm Sohla El-Waylly, and today I'm at the New York Times cooking studio, and we're going to talk all about rice. We're just going to do a few basic things today so you can just get a good foothold into the rice world. And it's also another essential ingredient that when you know how to cook rice, you can make any meal, breakfast, lunch, or dinner. There's a lot of different kinds of rice. There are long grain rices, medium grain rices, and short grain rices. Long grain rices are typically more fluffy. The shorter the grain, oftentimes it's more sticky. That's not a hard and fast rule. In general, that's usually the way it goes. And then besides that, you'll find brown rice and white rice. Brown rice is the whole grain. It's fully intact. So it's gonna have the germ and the bran. And with white rice, the germ and the bran are removed. And then there are other things to look for in your rice. Parboiled, that means that the rice has been par-cooked and dried. What that does is it kind of enhances some nutrients, increases digestibility, and it makes the cooking a bit more foolproof. When rice is cooked and then dried, it goes through a process called starch retrogradation, which makes the starch molecules a bit more sturdy and strong, so you have fluffier grains. That's what Uncle Ben's is. It's a parboiled rice that's almost impossible to make incorrectly. Then you can also find enriched rice. This is similar to enriched flour, where basically it means that there are some added vitamins and minerals. The price range on rice can vary greatly, and unfortunately with rice you get what you pay for. So high quality rice costs more, but it is a grain, so it is still relatively cheap compared to other ingredients. If you're a big rice fan, I say go for it. It lasts forever, and there is quite a difference between an inexpensive rice and a slightly more expensive rice, and we're just talking about a couple dollars a pound. If you eat a lot of white rice, you can actually totally buy it in bulk. White rice lasts almost forever, as long as you keep it in a cool, dry place. Brown rice doesn't last that long. Because it's got the germ intact, it has these oils that will quickly go rancid. That's actually the reason why rice was initially pearled, which is the process of removing the husk and the germ. Increases shelf life to practically forever. If you've got room, get a big old bag of rice, you'll always have rice. When I think about the pitfalls that might come along with cooking rice, a lot of it comes down to doneness, overcooked or undercooked rice. There are a few key steps that'll help you avoid that, and then even if you do mess up your rice, I'm going to show you what to do with that rice, so no rice will ever go to waste. Growing up, rice was very important in my culture, and we were taught that you don't even waste one grain of rice. So today I'm going to teach you how to never waste your rice. We're going to do some fun stuff with it. We're going to pick all of this up. This bag especially is coming home with me. We're using white rice today, and the great thing about white rice is that it cooks pretty quickly. So we're going to start by steaming some rice. This method most of the time is referred to as steaming, but we're not actually steaming it. The technical term for this method is the absorption method, because all of the liquid we're adding to the rice is going to be fully absorbed. This method will work with any kind of white rice. The only thing is, depending on the length of the grain, the ratio of water will change. As a general rule of thumb, shorter grains of rice do better with 1:1, so 1 part rice, 1 part water. Medium grains do better with 1 part rice to 1.5 part water, and then long grain rice like basmati does better with 2:1. That's a good place to start, and then tweak. Maybe you like your rice a little bit firmer or a little bit softer. So I like to write my personal favorite ratio on the package to go back to, and then if I buy that rice again, I'll write it down. You can curate your rice cooking to your personal specifications, and I think that's really fun. So for steamed rice, simple process. First, we're gonna rinse our rice. Then I like to soak it. This is optional, but I'll discuss the details later. And then we're gonna bring it up to a boil, cover it, and cook it on low. A little fluff at the end, and a rest. Simple steps, but let's go through the details so you can perfect it. Rice cookers. I know a lot of folks swear by one. I think that they're wonderful. I personally don't have one because I live in New York, and not only do I have limited counter space, but I have 1 outlet for the entire apartment. This will work for a rice cooker too. You just don't have to manage the heat, but you rinse the rice and soak the rice and add the water in exactly the same way, and then you just press a button. So if you have a rice cooker, oh, good for you. I'm jealous. If you don't have a rice cooker and you're making it in a pot, any pot will work. The main thing that matters here is you have a tight-fitting lid. If you don't have a tight-fitting lid, you can always kind of work your way around it by first wrapping the top with a little bit of foil, popping a lid on top. My favorite pot to cook rice at home is a little Dutch oven that has a really tight fitting lid. Nothing comes out of there, but that's really all you need. Okay, so to rinse the rice, I like to use a big bowl because you want to get in there and swish gently. You don't want to break the grains. You want to swish to help get every grain moistened. And then I'm going to tip it out and we're going to repeat. When you rinse the rice, you remove a lot of those exterior scuffed up starches. So when you cook your rice, it doesn't get all clumpy. And you don't have to worry about getting all the water out this point because we're going to just keep rinsing and then it's going to get a soak. Growing up, I was always told minimum of 3 times. I don't know why 3 is the lucky number, but I was always told minimum of 3 times. And you want to rinse until the water runs like mostly clear. It's never going to get totally clear, but you just want it to be clear enough that when you stick your hand in there, you can see it. I like to soak my rice in the cool water for about 15 minutes up to 2 hours. This is not a required step, especially for medium and short grain rices. And the soaking step is especially essential for longer grain rices because it prevents the grain from breaking, cooks much more evenly, and you end up with like a longer, more like beautiful, perfect grain of basmati. Doing the little soak makes a huge difference and makes your rice a little bit more foolproof. My rice is soaked and I'm gonna drain it. Once you have soaked it, you wanna be a little more gentle with it because it's more likely to break at this point. So here I've got my 2 cups of jasmine rice. To that, I'm gonna add water. Adding salt is optional. So if you're gonna have your rice with something really flavorful, like a curry, I don't season my rice. There's gonna be enough flavor coming from everything you're gonna serve it with. But if I'm gonna just have my rice with like an egg, I would season it. I grew up with rice that would never had salt in it because we had it with such flavorful things. So I'm not gonna salt it. And we're gonna start by bringing this up to a boil over medium-high heat. Just give it like an occasional stir as it comes up to boil just to make sure it heats evenly. And I like to do this bit covered so we can lose as little water as possible. So once we bring it up to a boil, I'm gonna turn it down to the lowest setting. And at that point, you do not stir. You do not peek. You set a timer and you trust that it's doing its thing. If you get in there in the middle of cooking and pop off the lid, you're gonna lose too much steam and it's not gonna cook right. And then once we open it up, we're gonna look for some doneness cues to determine what to do next. We're gonna go through some rice troubleshooting. So I set a timer for 15 minutes. We are 20 seconds away. I have not peeked. So let's check it out. Wow. We're gonna get in with a fork, fluff it up, and you wanna make sure that your grains are tender and that there's no water left at the bottom of the pot. So if you get in there to fluff and you notice that you have a little water left at the bottom of the pot and your rice is still not tender, just cover it back up, put it on low heat, and let it cook for another 5 minutes and check it again. If you notice that there's some water at the bottom of the pot and the grains are cooked through, just uncover it and let it cook on low for 5 minutes to drive off that excess moisture. And let's say you uncover it, it's dry and it's undercooked. Just grab like a back of a wooden spoon and make a little hole right in the middle and pour in about like a tablespoon of warm water. You don't need much. Cover it up and let it cook on low heat for 5 minutes. Check it again. We just need it to get really nice and steamy. Oftentimes your rice is just like a little bit off and you can take it the rest of the way with some adjustments. But if it's perfect and tender and you've got no liquid at the bottom, just cover it and let it rest. The resting phase is really important. When you let it rest, the grains will firm up, become distinct, and any little bit of excess moisture will be absorbed. Okay, so next we're gonna talk about making a pilaf. A pilaf can be many things, and it's in a lot of different cultures, often with different names. Pilaf is like the French word, but anyone who has rice has their version of pilaf. So a pilaf essentially at its core, it means that you're gonna take grains, toast them in some fat, and then you add a liquid and cook it. Pilafs can be made with any grain, just like with the steaming absorption method. This is a great place to like really simply level up the flavor by changing out what you cook it in. So I'm gonna cook this in water, but you can do broth or dashi or any kind of stock. Do a mix of like water and tomato passata, or maybe water and coconut milk. This is just like the most basic, the most essential pilaf, but then you can get very creative with it and change it up however you want. First step, I'm just gonna toast the grains in some butter. The rice I've already rinsed and soaked. So we're starting out exactly the same way as we do with steamed rice. So this is actually a Sohla basmati, which means that it's parboiled. The great thing with the Sohla basmati is it can handle a longer cook time. So this is a great place to start your pilaf journey because it is a very forgiving rice. Now when you first add your rice, It's gonna sound like very simmery, very like wet. And you want to cook it until it starts to sound more sizzly, so you know that you've driven off a lot of that excess moisture and we're getting like a nice good toast on it. So be pretty gentle with your tossing, but keep it moving pretty frequently so that every grain of rice can have some time in that fat. So I'm over medium heat. I'm just gonna keep stirring and tossing, and we're listening to the sizzling, and we're also going for smell. So you wanna go until it like smells slightly more nutty, almost like a popcorn vibe. It's gonna make it taste more aromatic, much more flavorful. And then most importantly, it deactivates a lot of those surface starches, which prevent it from getting too clumpy. So we end up with like a really fluffy pilaf at the end. So this parching step, this is really what makes a pilaf a pilaf. One way that I love to do this at home is I'll cook it with bone broth instead of water, and then it just like bumps up the nutrition, and then you just like, while it's resting, there's still a lot of heat coming out, and I'll just pile on some like quick cooking vegetable. Like pile on some spinach, cover it, it'll wilt from that heat, and that's all you need, that's dinner. Okay, so let's just listen to it for a second. The sound is kind of sharp and like pointy, you know what I mean? And that's how you know that the moisture has cooked off and we're done with our parching. Okay, so now I'm gonna add my water. Exactly like when you steam rice, we're gonna bring it up to a boil, turn it down to low, cover, and let it do its thing. So basmati rice, longer grain, higher volume of water, needs a bit more salt. Pilaf, unlike steamed rice, I do always salt. Okay, so we'll bring that up to a boil. So the pilaf cooking time, I like to take it 18 minutes. I know that's very specific instead of the 15. A lot of people give you a range, but I think you should like figure out a timing that works for your stovetop and go with it, because when you open and fuss, it kind of makes it worse. So I think it needs a little bit more time because we've toasted it, so the grains are a little bit more like sturdy. They need a little bit more time to cook through. We're gonna bring it up to a vigorous boil. I'm gonna stir it to make sure that it's boiling all the way through. Cover, knock it back to low, and it's gonna steam for 18 minutes. We're gonna uncover, look for those same doneness cues as the steamed rice. Is there any liquid at the bottom? Has the grain cooked through? If everything looks good, cover and let it rest for like 15 minutes. You can even let it rest for like an hour. So this is a great thing to make while you're making other stuff. Rice is a lot easier than pasta because pasta doesn't wait for you. Pasta waits for no one. Rice can wait for you. And it's been resting now for about 15 minutes. And now we can see we have our really nice, fluffy, buttery rice. Look at it glisten. What's great is I can like really smell the butter, and that's all that's in here. So imagine if you threw in like a little sprig of thyme. Whoa. If you added a little turmeric at the beginning, then you get like a beautiful yellow rice. You could maybe saute some butter and garlic in your fat, and then instead of water, use broth. Whoa, that's like level 2 pilaf. You want to take it a little bit crazier, maybe add some like quick cooking vegetables or protein, like throw in some shrimp or some peas. That's level 3 pilaf. And then, you know, you want to go even further, cook it with like marinated lamb and a bunch of spices. And that's like super fancy pilaf. So play around with this, but this is a good place to start. So now we're gonna make some fried rice. This is the perfect thing to do when you have some leftover rice hanging out in the fridge. In fact, it's better when your rice is made the day before, because when it goes into the fridge, it kind of like dries out a little bit. So it's gonna have a perfect texture for your fried rice. So there are so many different fried rices. Of course, everyone knows the China, but even there's so many different fried rices. There's fried rice where I'm from, Bangladesh, where we do it with like turmeric and shallots. There's fried rice in Latin America. Everywhere where there's rice, there's fried rice. So this is not like the ultimate fried rice. I'm just gonna give you a rough guide on how to make a fried rice with whatever you got in your fridge, because this is the perfect thing to make when you just have nothing to eat. That's what we're here to do. I wanna teach you how to make something with what you've got. So the basic things that you need for your fried rice is you're gonna need your cooked leftover rice. About a cup a person is a good starting point. Then you're gonna want some aromatics. We're going classic here, so I've got ginger, garlic, scallion. We're gonna use some leftover diced deli pastrami as our protein, but use any kind of meat you've got. Frozen shrimp or leftover rotisserie chicken, or if you wanna do a little crumbled tofu or seitan, get creative. We're also gonna add an egg, because I love an egg in my rice. Some flavors. and some vegetables. Having some frozen vegetables in your freezer will save you. I always keep some mixed vegetables, some peas, and some kale, always in my freezer. And you will use it. It's a great way to like sneak in some veggies when you are just trying to throw a meal together. So traditionally, a lot of people make fried rice in a wok. My favorite thing to do is make fried rice in a large, well-seasoned cast iron skillet. It's gonna get really hot, cook really quickly, and give you that like essential flavor of fried rice, which really does come from cooking it hot and fast. So the reason why fried rice is so good with leftover rice is when you put rice in the fridge, it goes through this process called starch retrogradation. And basically what happens is when you cook any starch and then chill it, the carbohydrate strands in it actually like stiffen up, they get stronger. It's not just becoming stale or dry. There's actually something changing chemically to the rice. All you need to know is cold leftover rice makes good fried rice. Cooked rice does go bad pretty quickly, so warm rice should be stored in the fridge as quickly as possible. If you leave it out for more than 2 hours, there's a danger of it developing that not so good bacteria. We're gonna start by adding some neutral oil. This is gonna get quite hot, so you don't wanna do this with butter or olive oil. So we're using an avocado oil here. You need to be generous with the fat. So the first thing I'm gonna do is cook my protein. It's already cooked, so we're just looking to brown it, get a little color, a little char. There isn't really a general ratio of stuff to rice. You just kind of go with what your heart tells you. The other thing that's important when you're making fried rice is everything happens pretty quickly, so you need to make sure you got all of your mise en place before you get going. Ooh, a great, fantastic protein for fried rice, Spam. Classic. I also love hot dog fried rice. I almost wanted to do this with hot dog, but I didn't know if that was like not cool enough for you guys. But like, dice up some hot dogs and get it really crispy. Wow. Okay, so we got some nice frizzly action on our pastrami. I'm gonna scoop this out and then we're gonna go in with our aromatics. The best thing about cooking your protein first is we've developed a little bit of really flavorful fond at the bottom of the pan. We wanna make sure that that does not burn. I'm gonna add a bit more oil. Important thing with fried rice is you do not want your skillet to get dry. And then we're going right in with our scallions and our garlic and ginger. This is gonna go pretty quickly. So this just needs a little bit of heat to kind of bring out the flavors. We don't want to develop too much color here. And once we add our veggies, it's going to cool down the pan. So everything smells really nice and aromatic, and my scallions have nicely wilted. So now I'm going to add a whole bag of frozen vegetables, and it's going to immediately cool down the pan, keep everything from burning. And at this point, I'm going to lightly season with salt. Even though we're going to finish with soy, you still want to season in layers and make sure everything gets a little hit of salt. And from this moisture from the veggies, I'm gonna scrape up that fond. So fond is when you're cooking something and you develop like a little brown crust at the bottom of the pan from the cooking. That's like the most flavorful thing. It's like the essence of flavor. You don't want it to go to waste. And instead you wanna figure out ways to like scrape it up and reincorporate it back into your dish. So here, the moisture from the veggies is gonna help us scrape up that delicious fond so it ends up all in our fried rice. I think it's important to make sure that you give it a second for all the moisture to cook out. We're not just defrosting it. Right now when you listen to it, it sounds really wet. We're gonna cook it until that wet sound switches to like sizzling, just like when we were parching our rice. So while my veggies continue cooking, here I've got a couple of eggs I've already beaten with a big pinch of salt. As you learned in the last episode, we always salt our eggs in advance, yes? My pan is feeling a little dry again, so we need a little more fat. Don't be skimpy because there's a lot of rice, and we need to make sure all the rice gets nicely coated in that fat. Wait, do you hear it? Doesn't it sounds more pointy now, right? So now we're gonna add our eggs. Make a little nest so it doesn't spill all over here, and we'll pour our eggs right in the middle. At this point, when I've got my veggies and my mix-ins and I'm looking at my pastrami, that's when I really decide how much rice I'm gonna add. So I don't think I'm gonna add actually all of that. I think it might be a little bit too much. Always like hold back, because the last thing you want is for you to take this time to make this really flavorful base, only to like put way too much rice and totally dilute the whole thing. So rice going in, and we're gonna add our pastrami. Let's mix this up. When you're cooking a lot at home, you don't wanna have to be looking at a recipe and measuring stuff all the time. You kind of want to like go with your instincts and like follow your heart, you know? So a lot of times that means just like being patient, looking at something, thinking about it before you like dump it all in there. Like right here, for me, this is the right amount of rice. And that means I left a little bit behind. And that's okay. That's going to be a snack later. Everything's really nicely mixed together. And we're going to do our final seasoning of a little bit of soy and sesame oil. Sesame oil is something that you want to always add at the end so you don't lose those like really nutty aromatics. And we've already seasoned a lot of this with salt, and the pastrami has a lot of flavor, so you don't need a ton. I'm gonna get in there and give it a taste, see if it needs anything else. When you're tasting, don't taste it when it's like ripping hot, because you're not gonna get like a very good idea of how something tastes. So like, cool it down to the temp that you would actually eat it. And remember, you don't have to make this fried rice. I just hope you got some tips to make your own fried rice. Okay, so we went over some basic techniques, but let's say you made a pot of rice and it's not perfect. It's not the end of the world. You can salvage it by making a porridge. So I'm gonna show you how to take some rice that maybe is like overcooked, mushy, maybe the grains are sticking together a little bit too much. Whatever it is, you don't wanna eat it as it is. We're gonna make a porridge. So here I've got a pot of sushi rice. It got a little too wet, it got a little too sticky. We're gonna split it up into 3, and I'm gonna show you 3 really simple porridges. I grew up with something called guluti, which was rice that was simmered with a little bit of lentils, so we're gonna make a variation on that. But a lot of places you have kanji, which is like a very simple rice porridge, rice that's cooked until it's really nice and tender, and then it's topped with a few simple things. And we're gonna do like an Italian vibe one with brodo and some pecorino and peas, so it's kind of like a lazy person's risotto. And the best thing about porridge is that it really stretches your rice. So we're gonna take this little pot of rice and we're gonna turn it into 3 big pots of porridge. And it's almost like magic how you can serve so many people with such a small amount of rice. And I think that's why porridge is so important in so many different regions that eat rice. My first one is gonna be like a very simple kanji. Kanji is quite bland because it's meant to be kind of like a soothing comfort food. So we're just gonna cook this with water. You can totally eyeball this. So if you're cooking this and it looks a little bit too thick, add more water. If you're cooking this and it feels a little thin, just keep simmering because you can't overcook it. So the second one is kind of loosely based off of something I grew up having called guluti. So to this I'm gonna add water and some rinsed red lentils, and that's gonna simmer all together. Now our final rice porridge, I'm gonna simmer this up with a little bit of bone broth. Now we're gonna simmer all of these. Depending on how cooked your rice was to start with and what kind of grain you started with, it's gonna vary in time, but anywhere from like half an hour to an hour. Stir it occasionally because it could scorch. You want it to simmer kind of vigorously to really break up the rice. And then take a look and see what texture you want. You know, like there's some people who like thin oatmeal and some people like thick oatmeal. It's the same thing with the rice porridge. So add more moisture or uncover and let it simmer and reduce depending on the texture you want for your final porridge. Okay, so my porridges have been simmering away and you can see they've really transformed. So you can see the rice has like fully broken down. It's really thick and creamy. This is the one with lentils. So those lentils added extra body and made it really nice and thick. And this is a nice texture for me, but you know, you do you. If you want it thicker, you continue cooking it down. If you want it thinner, adjust with water. We're gonna add some salt, season it up. It's always good to wait until the end to season because you don't know exactly how much or how little liquid you're gonna add. So let's give that a taste. It needs quite a bit of salt because we took that rice that was already not seasoned and then added a whole bunch of liquid to it, which was also not seasoned. So you need to take a minute, get the seasoning really nice, because that's like the key to the flavor here. So this is our plain rice with just water, nothing going on here. You can see it looks quite different from the rice with the lentils. It's a little bit less creamy and it has more of like a white hue. This is a good texture for me too. And this one I'm actually gonna keep totally bland because we're gonna top it with some very flavorful toppings. So I think that's good the way it is. And our final one. So this is the rice that we simmered in some bone broth. I did also have to add some water to get it to be the right consistency. But as you can see, it's like really, really creamy and soft and tender. And this one is gonna get a few extra finishing touches. Just gonna use frozen peas. I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with frozen peas. It's something we always have in our freezer. and it really does often save the day. Sometimes this is the only vegetable in the house. So a little pecorino. How about some pepper? And a little lemon zest. So this is like, it has like risotto vibes, but not at all. Not at all. This is not at all risotto. Risotto, the grains are like intact, but like if you want the comforting, creamy Italian rice vibes, this is like a really easy way to get it and save your rice that maybe wasn't perfect to begin with. And I'm gonna taste this one after my cheese has a chance to like melt into it and incorporate, because the cheese does bring a lot of salt, so we don't want to over season. You know, whenever I'm adding a mix in like this, I do wait to season because it's gonna adjust how much seasoning you need. And this is feeling just a little thick for me, so I'm gonna add a little water. You gotta remember that this is on the stove and like piping hot. So once it hits the plate, it's gonna thicken up a little bit because it's gonna cool down a touch. Okay, so I'm gonna taste now and see how I am on salt. Even though there's no salt in there, it's pretty flavorful because we used bone broth and pecorino, but it still needs a good bit of salt. And I'm gonna add some more pepper. And I actually think I wanna brighten this up a little and finish it with some of the lemon juice. And then we're gonna plate these up and add some fun toppings. So here I have, from that one overcooked pot of rice, 3 distinct, amazing, delicious porridges. This is not only a great way to use any leftover rice or overcooked rice or messed up rice, it's just a great recipe to have in your bank because it's so cheap and you can really use whatever you've got in your fridge to make it your own. You know what to do with your leftover rice, you know what to do with your messed up rice, and you know what to do with your just rice. And I'll see you next time for more 101 Cooking School. I don't know the title of the show.